Live from Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, it's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach Ballinger. I am your host. Thank you guys so much for joining us out there today. We've got a great guest. In 2021, we are bringing on career experts to answer your questions. So if you're out there listening, you can email in questions beforehand. We'll make sure to get to them throughout the year. Zach@zachballinger.com. Email them to me anytime throughout the year. We will make sure to get to those questions. No stupid questions. We'll take any questions following your career development. Another thing, we are streaming live via YouTube. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat box and we'll make sure to get to them. Jim, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Zach, it's great to be here.
We really do appreciate you, and we know you're a very busy professional and appreciate it. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we begin the show?
Sure, Zach, I'd be happy to. I've worked in human resources for over 25 years, and my first job in human resources was actually being a recruiter, and then had a chance to work in various roles in HR, ultimately working as a chief human resources officer. And then, as I worked in human resources, one of the areas of interest that kept coming up for me was coaching. And so since the last several years, I've pursued certification as a coach and recently earned the credential of being a board certified coach.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. And I'm sure you'll be able to really help my audience, especially with your background in HR as well as being a career coach. So we'll jump into these questions right away. So get out my pad here. So the first question comes in follow-up. So I followed up with someone about a job through my network. What is being too aggressive and what's being the right approach? I don't want to email them over and over, but how often should I follow up with either a recruiter or B, someone from a network that I've built over my time?
That's a great question. I think a couple things. One, I think you need to understand that there's lots of things happening other than just particularly that one job search, that job that you applied for. So often, if you're dealing with someone in human resources, even if their main job is as a recruiter, they're recruiting for multiple positions. They're often dealing with hiring managers who have other issues and other things going on. So while you may really be focused on that job and what the next step is, they may be dealing with other issues. And sometimes that can cause a delay. So it's really good to be understanding of that and patient of that. The other thing is, you want to try to establish an expectation when you actually have the interview. So if you interview for a position, a great thing to ask at the interview is, when do you think you might be making a decision by? And then that gives you a great clue. If someone tells you, we're not going to be making a decision for another week, or it might be 2 weeks out until we make a decision, you don't be calling them the next day saying, what's going on, where are things at? Then you're becoming a little bit too aggressive. So you want to give an appropriate amount of time and space. What I would definitely recommend doing is immediately after the interview, send some sort of follow-up, just thanking them for the opportunity to interview, really reaffirming your interest in the position. And then you can also set an expectation, if I don't hear anything, I may give you a call in a week or so. And then go ahead and follow through, give that call. And I'd say about a week after the interview is usually a good time frame, unless you've been told something else, to go ahead and make an initial follow-up just to kind of check in on the status of things. And then from there you can kind of take your cues, but you definitely don't want to be calling every day for people.
I think that's great advice. And actually, I think for network contact, this is definitely in a job interview. You need to ask that timeline. That's great closing questions too for you if you're the interviewer. Hey, so what's your timeline? When are you planning to make a decision on the hiring process? They say Wednesday of next week. Why don't you say, okay, if I don't hear from you by Thursday of next week, do you mind if I follow up? Which way, what can I follow up by? Should I call you? Should I text you? Should I email you? What's your best contact information? Ask these questions so you're not sitting there waiting by the phone. Well, am I sending too many emails? Am I harassing them? When you could already even ask them the question right up front. And the second thing, if it's a network contact, I think Jim said something really key. Sometimes we think of our own selves and we don't think that the other person's is busy and they may be slammed at the moment. I know even on my LinkedIn, if somebody's asked me a question, it's taken a couple days for me to get back
Mhm.
to them. So, follow up. Don't be scared not to follow up. That's what I don't think what we're telling you
Mhm.
to do as far as a network contact. But I would gently remind them and say, hey, I was just, I know you're busy. Just wanted to
Mhm.
find something, a nice way to touch base with them again. What do you say about network contacts? About like say you've reached out somebody on LinkedIn and maybe they said they messaged you the second time, but you're waiting on them to message you again after your message. How should you follow up with that?
Yeah, I agree 100% with your advice and just reaching out and just saying, hey, I know you're really busy, but just checking in to see if you're aware of any developments with the position, where things are going right now. Would there be a good time for me to check back? What do you think would be reasonable? And often they'll give you some idea or some indication. And your advice too, just being patient, and understanding of someone, I think we've gone from an expectation where we've expected an answer in 24 hours, sometimes for a question, to now we expect an answer immediately. And unfortunately, things just always don't work that quickly. So be patient.
Yeah, and if you're on LinkedIn, even like find a reason to message them without even asking them. So if let's say it was Friday, you could say, I hope you have a great Easter weekend. Stay safe. Simple.
Absolutely.
And you
Yeah.
followed up right there. You don't need to say, okay, so when are you going to call me now? That's a signal that, and I've gotten those messages too. I'm like, oh shoot, I am so sorry. I actually forgot to get back to you. Let me schedule a time for us to chat. So great advice, Jim.
Yeah.
So the next question comes in. It says, what is the best way to utilize LinkedIn? I am a college student, so I don't have a lot of work experience to post on there or share professional job situations. So, what activity do I need to do besides adding hiring managers to my networking platform?
Well, I think one of the things about LinkedIn is something that can work for you 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So you definitely want to leverage that as a tool in terms of your job search. So when you're busy and you're not thinking about work and job hunting, people are looking at your LinkedIn profile. So it's a great way of having something out there that you want to make sure that you leverage to the fullest extent. So one thing is just making sure you have a complete profile. So you want to go through and make sure that you have a good description about your background, your skills, your experience, any special training or education you have, that you will have a 100% complete profile. Make sure you check privacy settings, so have someone looked at your link profile or try to go in and looked at it when you're not logged in to see what it looks like to someone who's coming to your LinkedIn profile. So for example, your photo might not be showing because of your privacy and security settings. And when people sometimes hit a page and the person's not showing their photo, that's kind of a sign of, I really want to connect further with this person or engage further. It's a little bit of a trust factor. And you might not even realize that unless you really have checked your settings and verified how everything looks to a third party. Then I think in terms of activity, you don't have to be on LinkedIn every day. And but I think you want to be on there a couple times a week and you want to show some activity. So a real easy way to show some activity is to find relevant articles, things that are in the career field that interest you, and then repost and reshare those, and then just add a little bit of additional content, a comment or an observation that you got from reading the article. That shows a couple things. First, it shows you being active and engaged, on LinkedIn in terms of professional networking. It also reflects that you're an active learner and that you're continuing to read things and that you're interested in learning and growth. And I think that's a good way to be present. Another way that if you really want to kind of go the extra mile is to really utilize the idea of being able to post articles and blogs and do some of the content creation on there. And you might have some things from your class projects or things that you've done as a student that you can actually share as content and put out there on LinkedIn. And it's a great way to kind of have a portfolio out there visible to potential employers as well.
Great advice. I agree with all of that. And then, also, kind of what Jim's saying is to make sure that you're liking stuff and you're engaging content because it all pops up into algorithms. So when I go through my timeline, and now I'm a LinkedIn nerd, so I use it every day a lot. So I love the application. And like Jim said, you may not be at that level yet, but when I'm on it, what pops into my timeline a lot of times are people liking stuff, people
Hmm.
posting stuff. And so what happens is if you're gaining activity on there, your name's going to pop up more than likely. So make sure it's professional articles that you're liking. That would be my advice, not some.
Hmm.
We don't want to go down the political rabbit holes. This is a
Hmm.
Facebook diatribes and personal information. This is a professional site. And so make sure you keep that in mind. And then I would say work your connections that you have and try to gain at least 5 more a week every time. And these are meaningful connections where you can follow up every 3 to 4 months. Networking doesn't just happen where I meet Jim today and then we're done for the rest of our lives. It's a continuum of our relationship. And so just finding a way, whether happy birthday, happy anniversary, oh my gosh, great job on this leadership award. If somebody posts something, congratulations, this is great. And so you can engage as a student. And I've seen students really do a really good job of engaging over time periods. Jim, they have TikTok and
Hmm.
Snapchat and all that, and they're very creative students, and just find a way to leverage that creatism and the personal media to your professional media.
Yeah, absolutely. Leverage any content that you can. And then, as you're saying that, if you're interested in particular companies, make sure you're following those pages. And when they're posting news and information about the company, they might be sharing promotions or, grand openings or other news. Make sure you're liking and commenting that. And that's a great way of knowing what's happening with that organization and also showing that you really have an interest in the organization as well.
The next question comes in. It's the same topic about LinkedIn. When I connect with somebody, should I send them a specialized note?
I definitely think the ability to send a note and comment a little bit further is something you want to take advantage of. So, when LinkedIn started, really the idea of LinkedIn was you would not be connecting with individuals you really didn't meet with in face to face. So it was really meant to be kind of a follow up tool to people that were already in your contact list and your connections. And it's obviously evolved over time where it's now a tool of a way of introducing yourself to people and connecting with them in some way. But, particularly if you're reaching out to business professionals and recruiters, they may be getting dozens of people a day sending them requests, in order to connect. And often they're trying to screen those and say, is this a salesperson? Why is this person trying to connect to me? And it becomes a little bit of a challenge of managing all those connections. So that little bit of a note saying, I'm an upcoming graduate, I'm a recent graduate, or I'm someone in career transition, and I'm really interested in your industry and your company, and I would love to connect and learn more. That short note really gives them a sense of why is this person reaching out to me? Why do they want to connect? And I've found that by and large, people are very receptive to that when they have a sense of why someone wants to connect and why they're reaching out.
Yeah, because I think as you guys get on LinkedIn more, you'll notice and you'll have it happen to you that what Jim's talking about is sometimes people on there obviously are trying to sell a service or a product. So they might direct connect, and then after you've direct connected, they'll message you, "Hey, would you like to buy?" Just making an example like these 12
Mhm.
baskets or whatever
Mhm.
service they're providing. And so that can become complicated for a professional like us if we're just on there trying to connect with helping people or connecting that we're just like, oh no. And, so the same way, a specialized note gives us kind of have a heads up like, oh yeah, enjoyed your interview today. Great job.
Mhm.
Something as easy as that. It's a great reminder in our heads too, because we may be juggling multiple requests on there. So
Absolutely.
the next question says, what are 3 of the top mistakes as an HR manager you saw when people job interviewed?
Well, I think a couple things. One, realize you're always being interviewed, even when you don't know that you're being interviewed. So from the time that you have contact on the phone, when you walk into the reception area of the HR department, It's just not your time with the recruiter that's important. So you're making impressions, and often, individuals will, maybe make a wrong impression to someone, in the interview process, and that information will get relayed to a recruiter or decision maker in terms of how they came across or how they were with communication skills. And so always really remember that you're always being interviewed, and that if you're there, everyone you touch, everyone you talk to is important as part of that process. I think in terms of another mistake is not coming prepared. You really want to do your research. You want to understand the company. You want to understand everything that you can about the position, so that you show that you're really vested, that you're really interested, and you know what the job entails. When you know what the job entails, you're going to be in a better position to talk about why you may be a good fit for the position and what you have to offer. The other part of preparation is not coming prepared in terms of being able to tell your own story. When you come into that, you have to think about, how do I want to show up? Who am I? And what do I have to offer? And you really want to think about, what are those key accomplishments? What are those things that you want to share with this employer, so that they understand what you're capable of and what your skills are. And that preparation really will help you do your best and come across the best in the interview process. Also, leverage that time at the end of the interview. Often an employer will ask, do you have any questions for me? And sometimes when someone's not prepared, they'll just kind of stutter a little bit, and they'll say, "Oh, no, I'm good." That's a great opportunity. So have some questions. Be ready to talk to the company about the job. And some great questions are things like, can you tell me a little bit about a typical day is like in this position? Or you could say, what's the biggest projects or initiatives that the person coming into this role will be responsible for in the next 6 months? Or even just say, what's a future direction? What's happening with your company? Can you tell me any more about the culture of the organization? Something to learn more about the company. When you don't ask any questions, a lot of recruiters will read that as you're not really that interested. So when you ask questions, you're showing that you're interested. Also, when you ask questions, you may get some information that can really help you as part of that follow-up, as part of that hook. Because then you can come back with your follow-up letter and say, you mentioned that, one of the next projects coming up for this particular position was this. I feel like I really could bring a lot to that, and here's why. So you really get a chance to understand, how do you fit into the picture, and how you can link some of your experience and skills back to that employer.
I love it. That was very thorough. I just was helping a student a couple of weeks ago on what questions to ask an employer. And you stated them right there. We need to learn about the company culture, because it's a two-way street. What kind of culture are you getting a part of? And I also like to ask the hire manager, what's your leadership style, and how do you manage your teams? Because that gives you a good idea of what kind of manager you're going to be working for. I also like to demonstrate my knowledge. So if you're asking about a particular product, let's say you're going into sales and you're like, hey, I know I'm going to be selling Coca-Cola in the international market. Well, I noticed in Mexico you had a 15% decrease in supply, and there were some things that were hitting your company at that time. What challenges do you think your company faces in this product, and what challenges would I face in this role? You've just demonstrated how much research you've done. You've done your homework, insight, knowledge, and you're asking informed questions instead of just saying, what's the weakness here? You're actually giving them information and demonstrating, you reveal it. And then I also like to extend the interview as much as I can, because the longer you can get in front of the hiring manager and you can ask these questions, like Jim says, you don't want to just say, no, I'm good. And then, you might potentially have 15, 30 more minutes, whatever the time restraints are. I remember one interview, he didn't have any time constraints with me, and I didn't know that. And so I just kept asking questions, because it almost felt that way. And he never stopped, and we went another 45 minutes to an hour longer. And what later I figured out when I got the job is he did that to everybody, because he wanted you to conduct the interview, kind of. And so, like you said at the beginning, you never know when you interact with somebody, how they can affect your interview. So, great advice. I really appreciate the thoroughness of it. Um, the next question comes in about resumes. So, with resumes, what is the best way to form your resume if you're going into a career transition?
I think if you're going to a career transition, you would probably want to lean to more of a functional approach to a resume where you're showing what your skills and your competencies are. But I would kind of add one caveat to that caution. You still have to show your chronological work history for employers. So, some resume guides and books will show you taking a strictly functional approach where you don't list as much of your work history, you just list your skills. Employers will sometimes see that as a red flag of what are you trying to hide because you're not showing me your work history, and they're looking to see those dates. So there's a way of doing a hybrid. You want to lead, particularly if you're trying to get into a new field, with what your skills, what your abilities are, but at some part of that resume still show your chronological work history so they have an idea that what your experiences have been, that you've had a consistent and stable work history. Ideally, that's something that they'll be looking for. Selling those transferable skills is just something that you really want to think about and be creative, and think about how you can show those. Myself, I was a career changer myself. So my first career was actually as management, was in food service management, and then I went into HR. And in my first HR interview, what I did was I took the position that was open and I listed all the things they said they were looking for in one column. And then on the next column, I listed how I felt that I had equivalent skills and background. So, the interview process, I've been a manager for years. I know how to interview people. Have had experience with that. Dealing with disciplinary processes, I had the management experience. So I really showed how my experience mapped from what they were looking for to what I was able to bring to it, and got that person over that perception of like, what would this person from food service know about working in HR? And that individual told me the story years later that they had several candidates for the position, and some of them had HR experience. And after we went through the interview, they started the interview thinking they were interviewing me more as a courtesy and that they really wouldn't be offering me the position. And they said after the interview, and I went through that exercise, they canceled the rest of the interviews. They decided that they really found the candidate for the position, and luckily that was me. So I'm a big believer in being able to sell your transferable skills.
Love the answer. I'm kind of old school. I like the chronological resume. I will go with that any day of the week. I know different people have different philosophies. They'll say functional. You mentioned kind of the flaws of a functional resume,
Mhm.
which, and if you guys are out there listening, you're like, well, what's functional? What's chronological? Means you're listing your work history from the beginning, what you're doing now, where you work, and then all the way down. So your last job would be at the bottom, of course, and that's your chronological order. And the functional is more emphasizing your skills, and you kind of make it where it's creative, where you emphasize, maybe analytical, mathematics. You're listing and then a bigger summary and things like that. Is that right, Jim? I just
Yeah,
want to give them an idea of what.
yeah. Absolutely. So as you said, chronological is really where did you work, what did you do, what were your dates of employment, and as Zach mentioned and as I mentioned, many people that's the first thing they'll look for because they want to see what your history has been. But if you're trying to change fields, that might not tell your whole story. So the functional approach is saying, I have team skills, I have sales skills, and you're showing maybe some of those things that wouldn't be as apparent if someone was just looking at your work history. And some of those skills might also come from volunteer work and other types of engagements, but you're really showing that you have the skills and abilities for the job. And to some extent, cover letters can be used in a similar way that if you're changing fields or changing careers, you can also help tell your story a little bit through the use of the cover letter as well. But you don't want to make the employer look too hard for that. One of the things if you're changing fields, people will sometimes, I've seen people not change their resume. They're applying for jobs that really aren't, clear how they're seeing themselves being qualified or connected for that, and they're kind of leaving it up to the recruiter to figure it out. Well, the recruiter's not going to figure it out. They're busy. They have a lot of time in their hands. So you want to make it so when they look at your resume, they immediately see why you're applying for that position and what you have to offer. You want to make their job easy to stand out for you.
Yep, I was going to mention a cover letter, but again, I agree. You have to sell yourself in the interview process, and then, or even if you get, 80% of jobs are found through connections. So let your connection know, hey, this is what I'm doing. What would you suggest? John better than anybody else. So, what is he particularly looking for? And then you can kind of craft your story to that, and then why you're looking to get in it. Jim, this has been really helpful. Let's say somebody's looking for a career coach or they would like to work with you further. How do they get in touch with you?
So a great way to reach out to me would be through my website. My website is successatworkcoach.com. And would invite you to stop there. I share a little bit more about my background, and there's a way of contacting me there. I actually right now have a free booklet out there on roadblocks to promotions and how to overcome them. So feel free to check that out. I'm also on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect and add that note that you listen to this broadcast here on the show. Would be happy to contact and be a resource to anyone in the job search process.
Thank you for that. And then one more time, your website, just in case somebody missed it.
It is successatworkcoach.com.
Okay, and we'll also post that into the comments, guys, for you guys as well if you're looking. And Jim's name's right on the screen, so connect with him on LinkedIn. You guys always ask me for LinkedIn connections, and guess what? Jim just gave you another avenue besides him and myself. So please connect with us there. Jim, thank you so much for your time. We know you're a very busy professional. Thank you for giving back. Thank you for helping us with some of these career development questions.
Great. It was a pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.